Hello, I am Wallas the Polish toy guy. Today I'm going to review Fans Hobby Master Builder 04 Gunfighter 2 Transforming Toy, which can also be interpreted as what would happen if someone decided to make Masterpiece Generation 2 Laser Optimus Prime. And before we start, big thanks to Team Fans Hobby who sent me this retail sample for this review. And if you think this toy is simply a reuse of MB-01 Archenemy's body, you are mostly correct, not entirely, because there are several differences that do make them stand apart. And I'm going to talk about this in this review, because I really think these two toys deserve to be considered two separate entities. So now let's start the main review by going through the vehicle modes first. This engine in front of a cab semi-trailer truck, in my opinion, is a good alternative mode for this character. Not an amazing one, but it serves its purpose, and you can instantly tell that this is emulating Laser Optimus Prime. The choice of most shapes, and especially the trademark paint scheme of black on the back, red in the front, and the gradient meeting before the cabin is just too characteristic to mix up with someone else. I think I even like this alt mode better than the last official attempt at Laser Prime, the RTS United Deluxe class. It just handles most of the aesthetic decisions in a more pleasing way. Not all of them, but I'll talk about it later. I also adore the use of silver in this mode, especially on the elements with diamond-plated details. Part of the charm may also lie in the sheer heft of this toy. It has a similar size to an official leader class toy, and you can feel all of its mass the second you pick it up, and even with lower diecast content than with Archenemy, it can still tire your arm out after some time, so in a way it encourages you to put it down and enjoy the view. Like I said earlier, this is not a straight redeco of Archenemy, and now I'll show you what exactly was changed between these releases. And like with Fei Long, these changes were added after Gunfighter was originally announced, because yes, in his very first pictures he was a simple repaint, so props to Fans Hobby for going the extra mile to differentiate these two toys. Going from figurative head to toes, turning lights were added above the front wheel wells, which is more a nod to realism than to the original Prime toy that also lacked them. Next modification is the windshield, now sporting a black split in the middle and added wiper details, also changing the window colors, so now you can observe robot mode head hidden inside with more ease. And on the other end of the cab we have this, a dual pair exhaust system. This was present on Archenemy too, yes, but in his case only the main chromed smokestacks were pronounced, mainly because the other pair is just a design trick to blend the transformation hinges for the gas tanks with the rest of the vehicle. Thereby, I have no idea why this was painted here. Sure, sports cars have multiple exhaust pipes, as do some trucks, including Age of Extinction Prime, but here I think this looks a bit odd and takes some getting used to. The second to last visible change in this mode is the addition of black semi-painted flaps that bridge the gap between the cab and the back of the mode. Both Archenemy and the original toy had robot hips visible here, and I didn't even mind, but these flaps are a nice addition. They don't affect the mode's stability, and the pants section is still visible, but they help telling Gunfighter 2 and Archenemy apart, and you can always hide them from sight if you don't like them. The last change is redesigning the surfaces that will form the back of lower robot legs. Part of that I will discuss in a moment, but another part that might be easy to miss are these tabs and slots that lock in the filler plates between them in robot mode. Compared to Archenemy, their positions are switched around, and since I assume they will also serve as connection points for the upcoming semi-trailer expansion packs for these two, I do wonder if that will make the individual trailers work only with their respective vehicles, or will they incorporate some smart sliders to work with both of them. And as expected from a transforming car, this toy rolls on the floor quite nice, although with a bit of a squeak. And considering the name of this toy, Gunfighter, we have to address two things that were so far missing from this review. His guns. which are now part of the set and which look quite nice. Let's start with this one that looks pretty much like a variation on G1 Optimus Prime's ion rifle. It's nice, simple shapes, not too many sculpted details, but we do have several red, silver and gold paint applications that do make it shine. It's a simple but pretty weapon in my opinion. And then we have this double-barreled gun, which I also do like, even if it does seem a bit simpler in design and color application than the first one, but I think they work as a pair. It's kind of like old versus new, when one does not have to contradict the other and both can be used at the same time, and I like this. This is interesting to me. Usually I like when my toys have identical or symmetrical weapons, but in this case I think making them both very different works. Also, while the first weapon served mainly as a gun, I think this one has some hidden agenda in it, because I can't identify the function of this cutout over here, and if we collapse the handle we can see that it's sticking out in the back, which I think may mean that it connects to something. For example, the top of the battle station that's coming along later. And yes, like it is the case with many masterpiece-styled weapons, we can collapse the handles on both of them to plug them somewhere on the vehicle mode, though you can achieve a similar effect only in a different place with these still outside. For you see, a thing that Archenemy did not have but Gunfighter 2 does is this small cutout in between the legs on the back of the truck mode, into which you can insert the bottom of the gun handle. Just like that, and now it's sitting stable, it will not fall out. And I admit I'm not a fan of this kind of storage where the gun is pointing backwards, because this always reminds me of a cover fire while you're bravely running away, but I think that kind of storage is better than none. And also you can do this little trick, you can angle the handle a bit, rotate it forward, re-plug it, and now you have this kind of a cannon that's aiming at the air, so maybe he's fighting some jet form of Megatron, or this is some kind of energy mortar, I don't know. That's an option if you want. And of course we can also stick in this gun as well and repeat the same thing if we so choose. And the reason I showed you the guns in their compacted form is because, just like Archenemy, Gunfighter 2 has these flip-out posts for his weapons that are usually designed for the use of robot mode, for the so-called full weapon storage, but let's see if we can utilize them in vehicle mode. That is, if we manage to flip them out, because on my piece these are so tight, much tighter than on Archenemy. Oh dear, here we go, and now I have to find something thin to push this in to reveal the hole. I think this requires a toothpick. Yes, toothpick was definitely a good idea. Oh yes, this mission was a success, and I am happy we have this option. This, I admit, looks a bit silly, but it also looks a lot cool. Just this truck with two giant guns sticking from out the engine. What's not to love? And I suppose the fit is quite tight because these weapons are really close, and perhaps they are just slightly spread out to fit at the same time, but still the fact that we can do it means a lot to me. This is really great looking. And of course, this character would not be the same without this huge sword, which is carbon copy of Archenemy's sword structure-wise, but now has a blade made from the same kind of plastic as the windshields, and I really like this color. What I don't like is, despite all of the modifications done to this mold, we still have no way of storing the sword in vehicle mode, despite the fact that these flaps now open up, so technically they could be further redesigned to make room for the blade. One more thing that I'm very happy about is that my complaint about the grille and the front bumper was corrected. On Archenemy, these parts were not glued, they were just friction attached to the rest of the nose, and as a result, you could disconnect them from the rest of the toy very easy. Not the case here. I'm trying to move this around and it sits in place without any issues, so that's a good tune-up. Another very important change that we have with Gunfighter, one that I do consider game-changing, is that the tires no longer smell, and this is incredible. It may sound silly, but considering that Archenemy had very smelly tires and he still has up to this day, several months after his review, this is a huge step up from fans' hobby. Alrighty then, I think I said everything that I wanted about the vehicle mode, so before we transform Gunfighter 2 into robot mode, let's compare him with a few other toys, starting with Archenemy. And like I said, I have no problems with considering these two separate entities and not just redecos. And I will even say that in terms of vehicle mode, I think that this mold works better with Archenemy. This overall blackness helps to make this toy more mean, more powerful. Overall gives him a bigger, better feel of raw power. So while in robot modes both of these are great, in vehicle mode this is my preferred one. And for something smaller, here we have two masterpiece Autobot cars, Hot Rodimus and Smokescreen, and I think Gunfighter 2 scales quite nicely with them. And here's my Laser Optimus Prime family. In the middle we have the original, here we have the deluxe from Transformers United, and Gunfighter 2. And yes, you can instantly tell that each of them is different in some way, but their somehow similar paint scheme instantly tells you that they are, shall we say, birds of a feather, and I really like how they display together. Though I am looking forward to the times when Gunfighter 2 will be able to replicate the entire image of Laser Optimus Prime. And with all of that said and done, it's time to transform Gunfighter 2 in his robot mode. And we can start by pulling out his legs and separating them from these cover-up panels. So we can do it either with both of them at the same time, or we can just slightly separate them and then pull one at a time. And now we can go to these panels. We can flip this one around so that it hides in this pocket, and now we can push this in and the covers are almost invisible now. That's a great solution. And while we're here, we can also flip up this panel with these tabs matching the holes. It clicks into position. Now we can raise the rear wheel wells, and now we can straighten out the foot, and the leg is done. And remember that if you want to transform the legs back into truck configuration, you first have to push on this spring-loaded button to release them, and now they can collapse. And also, I really like how this cover hides and how it extends. You can see that here we have a little notch that we can grab with our fingernail, so we lift this up, and what's really great, the same notch is also a mean for us to push out this panel. So we push on this notch and it's connected to this part, so flipping this out is really easy. And now the legs are done, so let's move up to the backpack or the cab. We can first lift up this double piece panel and now collapse this section over the gas tank, like so. Using this hinge, lift this and spin it around. But before we hide this inside, we will first work on the rest of the toy. I find it's much easier to work with the head if that's out of the way. Let's work on the arms. So we can start by lifting up the front wheel well and unplugging the forearm from the torso. And now we grab the front of the truck and gently split it apart. Now we can rest our toy on its feet, and now we have to separate these two shoulder pieces, rotating them away from the head area like this, so that this passes this corner at such an angle, and once that's done we can now correct the angle for robot mode, and we get something like this. And now we lower down the forearm and spin it outside. Now we open up the forearm using this hinge, and that's usually easier said than done because on my piece this is a very tight joint. And once we win this battle we can open this up and flip out the hand, which we then have to rotate 90 degrees towards the torso and close it all off again. And over here we have a small connection point for this protrusion inside the forearm, and they click together and the forearm's done. Now it's time we go to the back and lift up the windshield, and it is said that we first have to flip up this panel, but once we start pulling on the windshield this will open up anyway, so we can call it automorph of sorts, like that. And now here we have the platform with the head, which we simply flip out without the need of flipping the head around while it's still inside. So that's a nice improvement which you can actually apply to Archenemy if you want. Like this. We rest it on the place where the neck should be, rotate the head, close this up, and now for the finishing touches we can hide these gas tank panels inside. And close this off. And with that said, Gunfighters 2 Robot Mode is complete. This mode is in my opinion the highlight of this toy. Visually speaking, it's just great and fits into the Laser Optimus Prime design template very well, being a lot closer to the source material and my image of this character than, for example, the official RTS/United Deluxe class. Nearly everything that should be there is present, and what is not or was redesigned can be forgiven seeing as the look of the robot form as a whole turned out. The amount of details is just right, with the shoulder guards and chest remodeled to better emulate Prime's original stickers instead of Scourges. The human-based proportions are good and the colours are vibrant and in all the right places. More than that, this may be inspired by the Battle Convoy Japanese reissue of Laser Prime, but Gunfighter 2 also now sports a lot of shiny silver paint apps that I didn't even thought I'd need until I saw them on my piece. Turns out I do, as they add a lot of flavour to this frame, and while they are not easy to spot under all light conditions, when they are definitely appreciated. If anything, I just wonder what are the odds of them rubbing off in places exposed to the transformation, for example, the sides of the forearms. Not too big in the far future to come, I hope. Bottom line, all of these factors together create a robot toy that is both a great display piece / collector eye candy and a good representation of a heroic, powerful robot warrior. I also think that the head, despite being one element not changed since last time, works quite well for this character. I think I'd prefer to have a smoother faceplate without these lower depressed bits, but otherwise this fits a battle-hardy leader nicely. And no, this time around the eyes are painted over with this metallic blue paint, so no frontal light piping fun with Gunfighter for us. So, now it's time to talk about the posability, though if you've seen a review of Archenemy already, you know exactly what to expect. So we have the head, which is on a double hinge. The first one is horizontal, so Gunfighter can move his head all the way around, and the second one is vertical, so he can look up and down, and you can also move his antennas back and forth if you so choose. And we have the shoulder pieces, which do move on their own hinge to the sides, and this also allows the main arms to move about this much in the basic configuration of this triple ratchet joint. If we move this up, and we can do it as much as it doesn't hit the head, the range of the arms increases a lot, and this part can also move down if you so choose. And of course the arms can move 360 all the way around, though again, like with Archenemy, the issue here are these side view mirrors that do not fold in, so you first have to angle this a bit so that it goes around without hitting the mirror. It's not a big deal, but if you're very spontaneous with your moves, you have to watch out to not break this off. And the arms can also move side to side on the bicep, and we have a hinged elbow over 90 degrees, and we have also movable wrists, and we have movable fingers with this 3-finger plus 1-finger split, and these are just one piece, but the trigger finger is double jointed, so technically it could wrap around the trigger of the weapon better, which is not the case for this toy, but we'll talk about that in a moment. When we move to the torso, we can extend the chest piece to enable Gunfighter to have up crunch, which is nice. We can then collapse it again if we want. We also have, at least on my copy, a very tight, very tight waist joint. So tight, much tighter than Archenemy. And then we have ratchet hips, which can kick forward with a nice clickety-click and kick backward, as well as to move to the sides to allow a near full split. And of course we have a simple side swivel in the thighs, and we have double jointed knees, which allow a great amount of bending, perhaps even better one if you play a bit with both of these joints slightly. It takes some practice, but as you can see, we can bend the knee even further. And then we have this platform with the feet, which can tilt so that we can extend the spread position, like that. And then using the transformation joints, we can move the heels and move the front of the foot with the toes. So yes, it's exactly the same posability as with Archenemy, but for this character, it's much more than enough. And of course, with such poseable hands, Gunfighter 2 can use all 3 of his weapons in robot mode, both when we want to use them in hand and when we want to store them when they're not used. And like with all fans hobby toys that have actual hands, we have these grooves between the back of the hand and the thumb, and it corresponds to a small rail on the back of each handle. So if we combine these two elements, we can smoothly attach each weapon to each hand. And I'm really happy that Gunfighter 2 has 3 weapons. It means I can occupy both of his hands without always using the sword, which is appropriate given his name. Unfortunately, these weapons have issues. The first one that's for both of them is that due to the design of the rail, they both have a bit of wiggle room, which means that positioning them straight in congruence with the forearm is not always easy, and oftentimes the angle is a bit off, as you can see, so you have to wiggle it a bit, hope for it not to change its position back. So it can be a bit of a task for both of these guns, but aside that, I think this one is better in robot mode handling, because this one again is too small, too short in height, and we can see this again when Gunfighter 2 is holding the gun, because if we look beneath, we see that because this gun does not have this extension between the main unit and the handle, unfortunately this means that the handle does not go all the way through because of the difference in height between the start of the hand and start of the forearm. and this often creates an illusion that this weapon is on the brink of falling out of the hand because it's not secured enough. And we can also give Gunfighter this nice sword plus gun combo. The sword is getting into the hand without any problem either, though unfortunately using the sword exposes the problem with the hands a lot, and that is something I talked about with Archenemy, with Megatooth. So far it's present on every Fans Hobby toy that has actual hands, and I'm wondering how long further along the line will this continue. I mean the trigger fingers, and I'm not even talking about the fact that on my piece they are super loose, and if we get them from under the thumb, they are really wiggly. This is what I call loose cannon, but that's beside the point. You can see these trigger fingers, as the name implies, were designed to wrap around, well, a trigger. But none of these weapons have anything like a trigger, which means that with their shape, they not only line up with the rest of the hand instead of going outside, but also for some reason they even wrap around the weapon even better. So it's a really odd looking situation where the trigger finger is much deeper inside the hand than the rest of the fingers. I don't know why is that happening, but it's happening on every Fans Hobby toy so far. Please fix that as soon as possible. And the flip out storage points for weapons are still there, so let's use them for the so-called full weapon mode. And with the gun handles folded in, attaching them to these storage points should not be a problem, at least as long as we keep an eye on these hinges for these points, because they do like to change the angle while you are working with them. But the first weapon is done, that's nice, without any issues, and let's try this again. And it's trying to run away, so I have to be careful now. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle at a slow pace. It can be a bit tricky. It's doable like that, but you need to learn how it works. And as you can tell, full weapon mode is one of these gimmicks that look better when viewed from behind, because from the front it looks almost like someone attached 3 black towers to Gunfighter's shoulders, but from the back this looks quite nice. And if you rotate the arms 90 degrees forward, you can turn this storage mode into a regular attack mode. And seeing how one of these guns is designed, you can also do this attack mode in a more, shall we say, underhanded way. And because the sword still has that flip out peg, it can be used with these attachment points as well. And with all these joints installed in the shoulders, Gunfighter 2 can easily pretend to draw that sword from that exact point without any help. And if you want to have a full weapon mode that actually includes all 3 weapons in storage mode, no problem, you can just open up this vehicle flap and take out these 2 filler pieces for the truck mode, and when you align them properly they can act as a triple piece clasp for the sword to be stored under the backpack. But wait, you can also store the sword in one more way. If you realign these pieces again to something like this and open up this transformation flap, you can create enough clearance for the sword to go through, and then its guard will rest on these seats on the sides of the interior of the cabin, so now the handle is right behind Gunfighter 2's head, much like it did for Escaflowne, for example. And as you can see, that's another place where Gunfighter 2's hands can reach without any problem. Or you can do it this way if you prefer. Now that I think about it, you can do all of these sword tricks with Archenemy as well. The one trick that you will not be able to do with him is to actually open up his chest. Because we all know on whom this toy is based, so this feature is of course a no-brainer for a toy that wants to act like a masterpiece one. And you just saw that I opened the so-called power core chamber, and here is this power core. And let's just look at this chamber. It's nice, has some black panel lining, simple, but I guess it works. But I would appreciate it if it has some better way to secure the power core in place, because as you've just seen, if you open it up at even a small angle, it will instantly fly away to the ground. And here's the power core from up close. And yes, this is an unofficial name for the matrix of the leadership. And I think it may include some diecast. It is quite heavy for its size. And it looks nice. We have two shades of metallic painting. And we have what Fans Hobby calls a real crystal. I'm not sure what is behind this term. But yes, you can't light it up from behind, but it does sparkle a lot under the right light source. And it also looks quite similar to MP10's power core. In fact, I think this power core was simply copy-pasted to create this one, with the addition of this hanger for a chain, because Fans Hobby encourages us to remove this from Gunfighter 2 and treat it as a pendant. I'm not sure what to think about this being almost a carbon copy of this one. It makes sense considering that Gunfighter 2 is an upgrade and not a completely different version of Prime, but still, I think I'd like it to differ just a bit to maybe underline the fact that Gunfighter 2 is a more combat-oriented body. Well, Fans Hobby did change one thing. If you look at the very edge on one side of the handles, you will see that a chunk is missing, and what's remaining is designed to be used with our fingernails. So if we grab Gunfighter 2 again, we will notice that on one end of his power core chamber, there's a small protrusion and also a small cut in this black channel, and this is designed to correspond to that cutout on the power core. So let's place it again. Not that one, although I am curious. Technically it fits. That's an interesting option. Right. If we get the proper power core inside, then this cutout and this cutout should make it easier for us to pry out the power core without any issues. Though given how loosely the power core fits this compartment, all we have to do is just lower the torso, and there, power core removed without any problem. And Gunfighter 2 can hold his power core in his hands, though given the internal shape of the hand with that channel for the guns and sword, it's not the most secure or convincing hold. And as a result, holding the power core with both hands is possible, but also not very convincing. So it's interesting that Fans Hobby tried to implement this gimmick into the toy, but given its execution and my needs for the character, we could easily do without it. And yes, if you're wondering, this toy can in fact equip MP10's battle axe, though it's not the perfect fit because of the difference in size of the fists. And we also get two other things in this set. The first one being this small collector card, which is nice and emulates the general style, as I think it's just fashionable to include collector cards now, though I wouldn't mind if it wasn't there. And we also get this colourful printed instruction manual that shows us how to transform Gunfighter 2 from robot to vehicle mode, how to use all the accessories and all the gimmicks, and it's your standard Fans Hobby instruction manual. It's very clean, very legible, so if you want to use it for the first time while handling this toy, it's recommended. It will not get you into any wrong places. And now it's time to start comparing Gunfighter to other toys. So let's start by bringing in Masterpiece MP10 Convoy/Optimus Prime, with which he scales almost perfectly. I think that Considering head heights, Gunfighter 2 is even slightly taller, but that makes sense to me because I always considered the laser body for Optimus Prime a more combat-oriented upgrade, so that's more than fine with me, and their aesthetics are similar enough that I would have no problems with putting them on the shelf together. And here's Gunfighter 2 next to my other two favorites: Classics, Voyager, Optimus Prime, and Legends Super Jinrai. And here's my good versus evil family all in one place, and I like this site so much that actually this is the way I display these toys in my collection, all on one shelf, and it looks great. I always really loved these two toys, and the fact that despite technically speaking being the same mold, they have such different color schemes that considering them two different entities was never a problem for me, and I'm happy that Gunfighter 2 and Archenemy share the same dynamic. Even if they are next to each other, these are still completely different to me. And it also helps that Gunfighter 2 has several new molding details, so this differentiation goes even further. And finally, here he is next to the common cola can, a typical CD case and a typical DVD case. So yes, this is one big transforming figure. To sum it all up, as a fan of Laser Optimus Prime, I am very happy to have this toy. It's a great vessel for this character, and whenever I look at it, a smile pops on my face and a sense of awe grows in my head. Admittedly, the vehicle mode is okay without any fireworks, but the robot mode is just visually stunning, and its combination of colors, shapes and details works really well, making Gunfighter 2 a wonderful display piece in this form, especially when you arm him up and pose him, and there are many ways to do this. But that amazement does not cover the toy as a whole, as some aspects of it are less satisfying, mainly improvements over Archenemy, which do not always cover my preferred bases. Yes, the tires no longer smell, and that alone can be a game changer. The added leg covers and gun storage for vehicle mode are also a nice addition. But there's still no vehicle sword storage, no folding side mirrors, and most importantly, no modified hands, which still share the odd trigger finger curse carried by Archenemy and Megatooth. The new power core gimmick could also use some work, as the chamber design is so loose that it nullifies the need for easy removal tools incorporated into it, and I'd like the power core itself to be more than just a copy of MP10's piece. As a result, Gunfighter 2 excels in terms of looks and emulating the spirit of its source material, and for that I adore this toy. But on a more regular toy level, while things are overall good, they could have been better, and the fact that they still aren't saddens me a bit, because if there was enough time for Fans Hobby to redesign this mold, fixing a few more things could add a lot of extra power to it. And that's all for this video review. I will be back with the next one soon, and until then, stay well.